Good morning. I do want to say thank you to Robbie for inviting me to this important event. It's great to be here at the SAFE Summit. And I want to thank SAFE for its leadership in driving forward serious ideas on securing our supplies of energy and our supplies of critical minerals. These are ideas that go to the heart of securing our nation. Energy is truly the lifeblood of the modern economy. Dense, affordable, and abundant energy is a singularly key input for American prosperity. President Trump knows this, and since returning to the White House, he has taken every necessary step to ensure America has stable, reliable quantities of energy. That's not what happened under the last administration. In the intervening years between President Trump's presidencies, new oil and gas leases were cut by 95%. Pipeline construction slowed to a halt. More than 100 power plants were shut down. This was a disaster in the making. But President Trump has put America back on the path to being an energy superpower. He vowed to unleash the liquid gold, as he terms it, under Americans' feet, to vastly increase supplies of fossil fuels, which will lower costs of products across the economy. He's reopened 625 million acres for production, including in Alaska. He's dramatically streamlining approvals for refineries, for pipelines, and for other infrastructure. Thanks to these bold actions, production has already risen by roughly 100,000 barrels per day. All of these actions are a part of the president's mission to drive down inflation for the American people. Restoring our economy to full health is itself a national security imperative. A poor nation will never be able to project power and secure its interests against foreign adversaries. A poor nation, dependent on others for its sources of energy, will never secure a favorable balance of power for itself or its friends and allies. This was a key failing of President Biden's worship of green energy. While China attempted to corner the global market in green energy technologies through subsidies and predatory trade practices, President Biden spent hundreds of billions fighting traditional energy sources and worked to mandate a so-called energy transition. And that would have been a transition to the very technologies China has been trying to unfairly monopolize. President Biden's agenda made American energy more expensive. It made America less competitive. And it made America more dependent on our chief geopolitical rival. But no geopolitical development has been bigger since President Trump last occupied the Oval Office than the war in Ukraine. In 2018, President Trump publicly declared that Germany was a captive of Russia because of its purchases of Russian energy. In the president's view, it made no sense for Germany to be paying Russia billions of dollars for energy while at the same time failing to live up to its NATO defense spending commitments to deter Russian aggression. Besides the hypocrisy of this arrangement, this relationship made the German people extremely vulnerable. It's not a stretch to say that Russia's energy leverage over Germany and the German weakness that it broadcast was provocative. Unfortunately, we saw that strategic dynamic play out in 2022 in grave and dire ways. When Germany substantially weaned itself off Russian gas after the outbreak of the war, it suddenly had to scramble to backfill a crushing supply shortfall, that Germany has over many years mothballed nuclear power plants and committed itself to an overzealous and unrealistic green energy transition did not help the situation. Countries like the US and Qatar were able to help close the energy gap for Germany, but the German economy still took a major hit, as did the economies of other European nations who similarly depended on Russian energy. President Trump will never put America in the weak and compromised position of energy poverty. President Trump's vision, his North Star, is energy dominance. The president has established the National Energy Dominance Council, chaired by Secretary of the Interior Doug Burgum and vice chaired by Secretary of Energy Chris Wright. And he's housed it directly in the White House. Those two gentlemen and the president will achieve energy dominance. I'm confident of it. And it will benefit every American. But it'll also help our friends and allies. President Trump is committed to ramping up the export of liquefied natural gas to virtually any country that wants to buy it. That's why President Trump ended President Biden's LNG export ban and approved the first new LNG export license in years. We're also working hard to open a new natural gas pipeline in Alaska, which, once operational, will deliver copious supplies to our allies across the Indo-Pacific. Not only are LNG exports a powerful engine of American wealth creation, but we want our allies and our partners to be able to depend on the most reliable partner in the world for their energy needs. That's the lesson of recent history with Germany in the Ukraine war. But now, another similar situation is brewing with China. And in this case, it concerns the global supply of critical minerals. As we all know, the world will only need greater and greater supplies of critical minerals as time goes on. They're essential to building semiconductors, smartphones, aerospace and defense products, energy generation, and so many other key sectors. But over the last several decades, America has failed to maintain a domestic extraction and processing ecosystem that was once the envy of the world. As a country, we are suffering from a series of self-inflicted wounds when it comes to mining regulation. We got rid of the Bureau of Mines. And now companies who want to mine in America have to deal with nearly 24 federal agencies, not to mention state, local, and tribal authorities. We allowed a corrosive narrative to take hold, one that told promising students that a career in mining, even highly technical engineering roles, was dirty, dangerous work. It's a false narrative. And worst of all, layer upon layer of regulatory madness means that today it takes 29 years, nearly a full generation, to open a mine in the United States. The result of this is that America and our friends are forced to look elsewhere to obtain the critical minerals necessary to drive our economies. And right now, the one nation on the planet Earth that has the advantage in controlling critical mineral supply chains is China. Now estimates vary, but it's safe to say that China controls about 60% of the world's supplies of critical minerals and 70% of rare earths. China also controls the refining process for an estimated 90% of rare earth minerals, or rare earth elements. And even as the world has woken up to the need to de-risk from Chinese sources, China has manipulated market forces to decrease competition. The price of China's finished products reflect heavily subsidized, vertically integrated supply chains that result in artificially low prices. As one example, this month, the Wall Street Journal reported on how an Australian company opened a graphite mine in Mozambique and a processing facility in Louisiana, only to see the profitability of those investments dry up when China flooded the market with graphite. Predatory tactics like these reduce the appetite for Western investments in mining and processing. This is not a sustainable situation for America or for the world. The Trump administration is laser-focused on making sure that our economy and our security are never at the mercy of China or any other nation. On day one of his second term, the president declared a national energy emergency. And that declaration stated, the energy and critical minerals identification, leasing, development, production, transportation, refining, and generation capacity of the United States are all far too inadequate to meet our nation's needs. And President Trump is determined to unlock these latent sources of American power, and doing so animates much of our foreign policy. The president is looking to build a brighter future with Greenland. Together, we can access the vast untapped reserves of minerals in and around Greenland. And doing so, with American investment and expertise, will enrich the Greenlandic people and make the free world more secure. But the role of critical minerals in our foreign policy is so much more than Greenland. We're working with countries in Central Asia and our Quad partners, Australia, India, Japan, on how to build new critical mineral supply chains. And we're working with mining and processing companies and governments to help them diversify away from China. And we're working with Ukraine to finalize an economic agreement that will generate investment in its critical minerals sector, that will energize Ukraine's post-war reconstruction, and that will bind Ukraine and America in an industrial partnership that will stand as its own statement of deterrence. And the president, of course, is taking action on the domestic front. Less than 2 weeks ago, the president signed an executive order to boost American mineral production. It directs the federal government to treat American dependence on foreign critical minerals as an emergency and to facilitate domestic mineral production to the maximum extent possible. It directs federal agencies to fast-track permitting. It mandates the identification of new sites on federal land for leasing and development. And it helps pair private capital with commercially viable mineral production projects. President Trump and everyone working under him knows how vital the critical mineral sector is. Critical minerals are essential to our industrial capacity, to our national defense, and to our national prosperity. We've taken much action in a mere 2 months in office. There will be much more over the next 4 years. Achieving energy dominance and strengthening the security and resiliency of the critical mineral sector of the free world is truly an historic mission. But it's not a mission the Trump administration can bear alone. It requires close partnership with industry. It requires partnerships with our friends and allies. But most importantly, it requires an understanding that if America is to remain a superpower into the 21st century. It's a mission that cannot fail. Thank you.